own question by being aware of the fact that the condition of the child is the condition of the mother. And you also recognize when you go into the principle of them establishing the birth certificate to make claim on the eggs that hatch. So from initially, though it's de facto, their claim is on the eggs before hatching, i.e. the womb of the women, etc. And then for the ones that hatch, logically, if one has or has been registered at seed and company with a birth certificate, which is again why very often they intimidate women and don't let them out of the hospitals unless they sign a birth certificate, because they create the bond with that. And so even if the woman is not married, they also make an assumption claim. And this is what is called assumed jurisdiction. That would be in personam jurisdiction. So write that down, you all. In personam jurisdiction. You can look that up in your law book, etc. We won't go into that because we don't want to expand the past that and change the subject matter. But that's also operative relative also to the jurisdictional powers, though de facto, referencing subject matter jurisdiction. So you want to look at it that. So they're operating what is known as assumed jurisdiction, and logically, and it's not necessarily logically, but by circumstance of the misinformation that people operate their lives with, most women don't have are not aware of their right of reversion of estate. They're not aware of their right to rebut properly disassociation or not standing as surety for the corporate state operations or operators, etc. And then this is also why they have been promoting falsely the U.S. citizen prospect to the people, getting them to say, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" People say yes, and there's an assumed jurisdiction. Because at that point, when people don't know, when say one of the Roman Curia members operating in an agency, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" and you respond yes, you just said to them that you are their stock. And it has nothing to do with what people think it does in relationship to the assumption of what citizenship means. That's the assumed jurisdiction. And then, of course, at that time, the being is considered state board. And at that time, this is, again, why as soon as that is established, although it's still an adhesion, while they start being what you call very abusive with the people, telling them to shut up and telling them they can't speak, and then telling them you can't talk unless you have a lawyer. Now that's another member of the Roman Curia who operative who constructed with the Daughters of the American Revolution the marriage certificate bond. And so that person is bonded, and it never dawns on them that they're operating from the bond. They're not the being that's standing before them is what you would call ward and has no even right to talk. And so this is the unfortunate situation where we have, like you say, women that are not married, where they trap them later with the birth certificate.
So what, if anything, do the Mormons have to do with the cataloging of all births? I was told that they have a record of, they have all of the records. Yes. We were going cross country, and we passed the place.
Particularly in the West, in the Utah area, because we got to remember the Mormons, the hybrid European Mormons, took over a lot of the gold of the Moors, which is why they refer to themselves as Moor men. And that people look at that as a religion, a religious sect. It's actually a religious sect of the Constantine order. However, they're claiming the areas, the west areas, because a lot of our gold was in that area. And of course, because the people themselves are the gold or the heirs, which is why the birth certificate records are in those big supercomputers in the Utah area. And so the other issue by them being presented to the masses as what you call a semi-secluded religious operation of people. It appears on the surface innocent. And because as soon as you say religion, people start thinking the divine creator.
Right.
As soon as you say God, it doesn't dawn on the people, government, ordinance departments. They're thinking the creator. Around with no qualifications, because the masses are trained that God, the word God, is the name of the creator, when actually it's a political designation, not specifically dealing with what you call the higher self or the lower self, but it is just a political metaphor, not unlike the word president or manager or senator or minister. Any of those words is a prerequisite, and if there's no attribute added to it, as an example, if you say God Yahweh, or God Allah, then that must be qualified, because the word God could mean even Satan or the demons. And just like, for instance, like the bishopric priesthood will tell the people, Satan is the god of this world, and so when they throw the word God around, you don't know which one they're presenting you for. And I guarantee you, 90% of them are presenting you to the lower self. Of course, you look at the conditions of Midgard, that tells you everything. If a carpenter comes to fix your house and after 20, 30 years, your house still broke, if you think that person's a carpenter, that's your choice. And I say, for all the claimed spirituality of our people, particularly in general, the conditions of our people, all you need to do is look at our families, our relationships, our communities, with our assumed concepts of pseudo divinity in relationship to these instrumentalities presented by the bishopric. The conditions of the community tells you everything. However, you can delude yourself into thinking that you've been operating in some divine order. That's your choice. However, the evidence proves to the contrary. And I know truth is uncomfortable, but if we're going to deal with the problems that have been facing our people and our communities, we must start being honest about the reality of results. Because you can't keep having massive levels of failure, disorder, disruption, disassociation, pain, misery, breakup, poverty in a community that is in actuality operating divinely. That doesn't compute. However, the fact of the matter is, we've been assuming ourselves to be super duper spiritual because we go to churches, mosques, and synagogues for generations, and the conditions of our families, etc., don't reflect that. Not really. But we like to think of ourselves as super duper special. However, the fact of the matter is that we've been operating under bottomry contracts owned by the Bishopric of Rome, and they've been regulating our families and our lives to their own malleable hands, and molding the social order and orders that we've been suffering to live under for generations. And it has not been good, so don't lie.
Here's a comment from Shine 9 Bay. I'm just going back. She says, my logic as a child, which came with heavy crucifixion, was the question: if love is free and universal, then why do I need a contract via a marriage certificate?
Easily. Now you just by what you just said, because keep in mind that common sense, and usually common sense is exercised by children until we interfere with our corruption. Common sense is in harmony with common law, and the Constitution for the United States, the original Republic order, is related to the support and the uplifting of allodial principles, or the rights unalienable or unlicensed, because lien means license, or to pay, or to apply, etc., or privilege distinguished from that which is unliened, etc. So unalienable rights, or what people sometimes you hear them say unalienable, unalienable rights are the opposite of privileges or licenses, and are in fact akin to what is known as birthright, or that which is harmonic with divinity, or that which is in divine nature. And therefore, that which is divine is not contaminated with adhesion contracts, or what you would call a compelling spirit, or some compelling transfer of goods or purposes under false pretenses, and definitely not under an adhesion contract with a marriage license. Absolutely is in contradiction to divine laws of nature, does not represent or present any platform where men and women are sold to each other via the corporate state on behalf of the popes of Rome through the instrumentalities and bottom instruments set forth by the daughters of the American Revolution and perpetrated against the people under the guise of Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, etc., to the people, when they're actually collecting lives and souls and inheritances for the popes of Rome under the guise of mostly and most commonly using Jesus as a front, etc., when it's actually a human trafficking instrumentality, i.e. a bottomry instrument, and totally misrepresented. Uncomfortable truth, but that's the fact.
So here's another comment / question from Cuz I Said So. So they made up this notion of illegitimacy of your children?
Exactly. That is made up based in imposing or coercing people to get a marriage license, when the fact of the matter is love and the reproduction of a child constitutes by nature matrimony. However, the agreement between man and woman and their family, etc., relative to the natural matrimony and the witnessing of the matrimony for harmonies in the society, is in harmony with nature, and does not constitute selling humans to each other under a third-party interloper contractor who created those instrumentalities for the stock market, their stock market, and in fact, with the later, while being processed, allonges that are attached to that instrumentality on the stock market, issued from 55 Water Street at New York. And that's the fact. So common sense would tell you that's in violation of nature. But most people are so busy going about their everyday lives, and then they're assuming that these things are legally required by divine law. No, they're legally required by the popes of Rome for their human trafficking purposes, and also for escheat operations and all future estate operations, or what you call the work life and the heritability life of the beings in contract with the corporate state, presented by their agents known as the clergy, and considered U.S. stock. And that is indeed what the U.S. Treasury bonds are also constructed on. And for those of you who are a little bit more aware, because a lot of people, by doing research and many people trying to reclaim their birthright in many different venues, etc., you will see across the land and actually across the world, even in other political jurisdictions, where people who are becoming somewhat aware are going through different processes of claiming or trying to claim a holder in due course in relationship to things that they've heard in relationship to the quote unquote birth certificates. So when you see people moving in those directions, they're to a great degree aware of the adhesion contractual operations, but you'll notice that hardly anybody mentions the marriage certificate superseding the birth certificate. That's true. And the other deal of it is, particularly since when the United States corporation owners went bankrupt in the late 20s, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, CEO for the United States Corporation Company, known as U.S. President, he pledged the birth certificates to again reestablish a surety basis for their instruments and their fiat currency operations as they had gone bankrupt. And this is where you often hear them talk about the so-called banking holiday for the U.S. corporation. But that's when they pledged the birth certificates, because the nations of the earth, they had multiplied, or what you call compounded or fractionalized, write that down, fractionalized the marriage certificates to such a degree that the treasury bonds constructed on them or leaned on them were weakened, which has much to do with the treasury bonds since World War II, particularly not being what you call valid or accepted. And the agreements also that was made with the by the clergy and by the Senate and the corporate overseers, i.e. the so-called Congress, House of Representatives, and the senators for the United States Service Corporation Company, who has still been falsely presenting themselves as quote unquote a legitimate government when actually they're overseers and they are board of directors for the United States Corporation Company, which is a British colony still, etc. Back in the debt, their debt, or renewing new surety instrumentalities with the birth certificate. So when you look at the birth certificate issue, you look at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration all around those matters, etc. However, don't forget the marriage certificates which superseded them, and that those instrumentalities are still have allonges attached to them and are still moved through seed and company for the United States Corporation Company. This has, no bearing in the, or what you call in to the current operations, because most of what's happening now is that the nations of the earth are starting to reject the U.S. Treasury bonds, etc. Also, which were leaned by the birth certificates. The owners of the United States Corporation, as most of you will find when you do research, try to renew them and try to fractionalize them again, which was denied them. And so you'll see those operations when you do research in the congressional records relative to around 2013. And this is the period of time where Pope Francis did the motu proprio, which we've mentioned to you multiple times, and many of you who've already done your research are already aware of that. And also, after 2013, you're most of you are already aware of the civil orders correspondence between Pope Francis and Barack H. Obama, which we also shared with you, and which you will also find on the flash drive that we've shared with you to bring your cognizance and your consciousness up a few notches, etc. But for the most part, it's really from an operative point of view, it is really to help people remove the illusion that permeates our communities, particularly thinking that the United States Corporation is the aggregate physical land country or organic, which it is not and has not been. And what they've been doing, the owners in their bankruptcy, they have been what is obvious and what has been obvious, trying to convert the people's estates to back their private debt and bankruptcy. Now, keep this in mind also, politically and operatively, from a principle of corporation operations and a principle of international law, they actually have no business nor any right lawfully nor legally to still be in operation. And that's a fact. And however, they're still extorting taxes from the people under the fictional guise of being their government fraud. They're still passing the birth certificates and the marriage certificates around the world in backing so-called debt, fraud, etc. And logically, with most people not being aware of the chicanery, the misrepresentation, and the corruption of the marriage certificates, birth certificates, driver's licenses, and all these other instrumentalities, CDLs, etc., that they've been using to back their private debt, etc., even though the rest of the civilized world has been rejecting these instrumentalities as sureties to back the U.S. corporation debt, which is, again, while you're having these international trade problems now that you're looking at. So you may be encouraged to look at what you would call physical instrumentality or object or manufactured object trade, when you really have to comprehend that the whole foundation of backing U.S. corporation sureties, etc., is actually human capital, and actually always has been. And the marriage certificate is one of the major instrumentalities. So bringing this up to you is to encourage you all to look at these things more seriously and to start taking control of your lives and to start making conscious and intelligent statements and instruments and claims of reversion of a state, which we've been telling you for years to do. And many of you who are conscious of these operations have been declaring your nationality as a reversion of a state, and doing different things to state for the public record in proclamation in different formats a reversion of a state, knowing that the United States Corporation Company operatives are actually organized criminal cartel, and that's absolutely the truth. And knowing that you would spend no more time and no more efforts of following any paradigm presented to you by anybody arguing racism and prejudice, which is one of the mind control paradigms that was created to divert the people from the rightful issue or argument of human trafficking, etc., which is really what your problem has been. And it's cheating of your estate, which is really the true root of the problem. And the issue of the marriage certificate as a subject matter for the moment, etc., is just one of the instrumentalities used by owners and regulators and administrative clerks and the clergy of the operative state of Delaware and the municipalities under that jurisdiction, and the other corporate state of institutions and entities, all of whom and all of which are lawfully bankrupt, etc., who are continuing to commit crimes against humanity with not only these instrumentalities, but with on different multiple levels enforcing the adhesion contracts assigned to and attached to these instrumentalities, all of which have been absolutely misrepresented to the people. And that's the truth. However, because there's also people among our own who have been operating, as you all know, in platforms known as so-called conscious community, etc., rather than also help liberate our people by telling the truth, or also many of them start getting involved in the lives of different people with scams to get a few, always trying to get in your pockets for a few thousand notes. They're going to sign some writs for you, etc. And these are opportunists and parasitic people, most of whom have some association with the Bar Association in one format or another. And instead of trying to liberate our people, are still right along with the hybrid priesthood, exploiting the injuries of our people rather than telling the truth, mainly because most of them produce nothing either. And so, because human trafficking has been a great part of the economic currency system operating at North America for generations, many people's jobs have been in some format constructed or tied to these different levels of exploitation. And rather than go into their divine mind and start being creative and started helping to eliminate the corruption of the priesthood, they make up little platforms disguised as um, different opportunities within the Moorish movement, which is set for the uplifting of fallen humanity and the liberation of humanity. They will use these platforms or other platforms that are put in place to liberate the people. They will find little niches within the platforms to actually continue to exploit the people by trying to get into your pockets. When the fact of the matter is, unalienable rights cannot be leaned. So be aware of people that keep trying to get in your pockets. It does not mean that a servant's not worthy of his hire, etc. It does not mean that you don't support platforms that they're working to help liberate humanity. However, fundamental operations of liberation has more to do with you being cognate and taking responsibility of your lives, and by people telling you the truth that most of your institutions or agencies that have been operating at North America are rooted in human trafficking and human misery. In other words, what they've done and what they do is, whether you're talking educationally, whether you're talking physical health, whether you're talking food, whether you're talking political economics, social engineering, almost all the institutions operating under the venues of the states of entities, etc., are placed in or constructed in such a way to create problems and then exploit the people, making heavy cost of them trying to get out of the injury caused by these misrepresented jurisdictions, one of which in the subject matter tonight is the marriage certificate that has other adhesions that were not told to you at all. So beware of people, and many people who are conscious, going along with the Bar Association trying to exploit our people and the problems that they're having, whether it's with the Inquisition Revenue Service, which is defunct and still operative, and it was blended, or what you call brought into the corporate U.S. Treasury to try to increase their powers, etc. Keep in mind they're bankrupt, etc. And you even have some so-called conscious Moors who have been even telling other Moors in relationship to the IRS to pay them, etc., while knowing that they're bankrupt, and then trying to get $3,400 from them out their pockets, while calling themselves some kind of a Moorish operation. Fraud, fraud, fraud. And it's been going on. And so we're making you aware of these things so you can watch that the enemies are not just among the hybrids. This is why Drawley warned the Moors. He said, be careful, Moors. Some of your own brothers and sisters will be trying to put you back into slavery. And you know the slavery is connotated. However, the more you comprehend and more you have comprehension of how the system of the United States Corporation and its subcategory jurisdictions, i.e., that means the state of Delaware, the state of New Jersey, state of Pennsylvania, state of North Carolina, state of California, etc., all of these are defunct, bankrupt, or subcategory or de facto political platforms, separate from and not to be confused with the aggregate physical land which you have been falsely told that they are. They have no lawful aggregate land or what was called territorial jurisdiction. That's a fact. And they've been using the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, the driver's licenses, etc., to back their private debt of the clergy and the popes of Rome and the private slush funds of the board of directors that you have been knowing as congressmen and senators and mayors and governors, etc., of the states of corporations, with the help of their Roman Curia operative members known as the clergy, whose oath I read to you in the Secret Treaty of Verona. And as a reminder of you all who are listening tonight, go back to the congressional records, read Article 3. So that's all your clergy. So if you say, oh no, I'm Protestant and I'm not this and I'm not that, all of them have this secret oath. They all come under the Vatican. And all the corporate entities come under the Vatican. That's a fact. Do your research. However, we're informing you so that you can, by your own will, start rejecting Rome and start, how you might say, loving Allah, loving Jesus, etc., loving the prophets like you've been claiming to do, and start rejecting Rome, who's actually been using humans as collateral to back their private corporate debt. However, their political platform is bankrupt. It has much to do with the political reflections that you see taking place now at North America and reflected around the world. That's a fact, not an opinion. Be aware.
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
This is from Rael. Can a man file a notice of claim on his wife and children to override any claim? And then, and also, let's add the other. If we
one
create,
question at a time.
What's the same person? It's the same.
It's still one question at a time.
Okay.
Because it blends.
All right.
Because remember, questions are